Well, I'd like to start with a story about my 7th grade English teacher. I adored her. I loved going to her class every day. In fact, I loved her crazy ratted up hair, and I loved her caked orange lipstick best of all. I loved being in her class because she exposed me to ideas that were not part of my upbringing, not ideas that weren't my own. And one day she stopped midstream, kind of an awkward pause. We were reading Lord of the Flies, and she put down her novel, and she looked out at us almost like she'd noticed us for the first time in a few minutes. And she said, "Oh, you know, guys, I know middle school is a tough place to be. You are forced into this social situation with people who are not like you. You are forced to interact with people you may not choose to interact with. But you know what? It's going to be okay," she said, "because you're going to get through middle school and high school." And then she said this, "And when you get out of high school, you're going to be able to choose the people to surround yourself with." What a strange message to me. What a strange message in a world today that is global. And I pause and think back to that, and I don't blame her for that, but I think we were in a time when we could exist as isolationists, maybe with some pride and localism, that cannot exist today. We do not exist in that world. And so I think about the skill that goes into being globally competent and what it means to be a global society. And I think of space has effectively collapsed through our access to people around the world, and how amazing that is, and how that is so unlike the message, we cannot avoid people. We are part of something bigger. Global competency, my focus is, I think about what it brings to my mind first and foremost is, are we asking ourselves the tough questions? Do we have the fortitude to ask, how high do we need to achieve to be on a global plane of competition with our peers, with our students' peers when they graduate? This is a different world, clearly, from when I sat in 7th grade class. And I think we are asking those tough questions. I see colleagues in our district asking those tough questions. We do want this for our kids, but right now, we have to be aware that it is an urgent. We're in the full face of this global competition, and it is an urgent situation. And let's keep going. Let's not just say, in a spirit of localism, I think we're doing better than the district over there, or wow, we did great in our test scores, we're above state average. That's great. That's localism. And that's not our world. That's not where we are. This urgency to create and be innovative. I think innovation and creativity happens in isolation. I think that we are not perpetually connected to technology. I think we have the opportunity to think on our own. I think that's an important skill for our students and for adults. And I think that it can happen on a chalkboard. But the reality is, while we do require space and solitude sometimes to write a novel or to solve a complex mathematical problem or to sit for 8 hours and write code, that still exists in our world. But we are so connected so easily, obviously, that it is social. And the fact that our communication is now social technology means that we have these skills that we need to somehow put into a quantifiable package, I believe, in our educational system. I think we all know what our students can access, or we're becoming aware of what our students can access, but what does this mean when a business, when we talk about what the real world is, the real world of beyond our preparation in K-12, when we talk about getting out of that K-12 experience and being in a business where people are moments away from communicating, collaborating, exciting things that can happen, or let's close a business deal, let's make some money for Utah's economy. And when we can do this in a moment, this happens all the time, right in our community. We need to be ready to deal with people, not just a technology, not just a message coming back at us, but these are people we're dealing with who have different cultures, different languages. Oh, how amazing, different perspectives that just are not our own. How do we prepare our kids for that communication that goes along with the technology? That human communication is what I'm referring to. An element certainly is preparation in a language. We want students to be able to communicate extremely well in our native language, so let's keep working on English, certainly. But if you can sit down and read the morning paper in Arabic or in Thai, and you have immediate access to what's going on, and you can be connected with that community and be involved in it at a much greater level than if you're waiting for an interpreter. The immediacy of knowing another language is relevant. A week ago in CNN Money published how in demand translators are right now, that we need tons of translators. But translation, I have to argue, while it's marketable, we need the human element if we're going to make a connection. We don't make a human connection that solves problems, global problems, or solves problems that are larger than us if we just have a translation. So how do we nurture that human connection, whether we happen to have a set of iPads in our classroom or whether we're still waiting for it? What can we do to make our kids globally competent right now with each other? I think it deserves asking ourselves, what happens when we come as adults face to face with something that challenges us, with an idea that may not be comfortable for us? What do we do when we see something that offers a challenge? And how can we coach our kids to step back and have the skills to really hear what people are saying in order to make those bonds? And what an exciting thing if we could nurture that. We call this in language study, this is often called code switching. And it's a really exciting thing when you get to the point where you're past translation and you can code switch. You can get into the social norms so that you can be graceful. You can be warm with your communication. You can invite that business deal, if you're a businessman, to happen, as opposed to pushing away and offending. And as we look towards this, I think back to my own experience. When I was in college, this is my lovely host family in Barcelona, Spain, and the first day I met them, hugs, warm welcome, no problem, no code switching. I'm ready for this. I'm going to take Spain over, right? This is great, I'm going to learn everything. Second day, the older brother, who was away in college, came to visit and came to greet me as part of the new family, and he stuck his hand out to greet me instead of a hug that I'm used to for my family. We hug family members, but he stuck his hand out, and all of a sudden I paused. I wasn't sure, what are we going to do here? And he starts pulling me closer and closer to him, and in slow motion and fear, I had no idea what to do. And I'm coming face to face with this rather good-looking Spanish man, and I'm thinking, I have not been prepared for this. In my 4 years of high school Spanish and in my multiple courses in college, I was not ready for that moment. And in panic, I turned straight towards him and smooched him on the lips. And it was awesome. Like, that is great. Everyone laughed. I was beet red. And I could never look him in the eyes again. The code switching, it was just practice, right? But when you're talking about the skills of coming face to face with something that's challenging to you, a perspective that's not your own, that's the skill, in a real way. It's a skill of what do you do when you don't know? And can we teach our kids to back up a step and be ready to listen, and to really listen and be open to a shift, like a cognitive shift, or it could be a physical shift, the way you dress. Now, I acknowledge that we're not part of international peacekeeping efforts very frequently in our own community, but it's this model of code shifting that we are sitting side by side with people solving problems and getting them ready for that, whether it's big time or whether it's right here in our small community. We have a community that is not isolated, and our kids can do these things, and we can practice these things in our own curriculum. I like to think of cultural competency as nurturing that knowledge of yourself first, of our students' self, of what culture really is to them, and understanding that it is special and it is sacred. And then from there, providing opportunities to say, how am I connected to something bigger? They're not like concentric circles, they're not separate, but the grains of sand interweave and they affect each other. And the more we can bring that to our kids in real experiences, the better. So what is cultural competency in our classrooms? I think we can kind of quantify it a couple ways. Number one, it is world-class education. Certainly, we need to not be mediocre. We want the very best in the knowledge base. And let's do it in more than one language if we can. But most of all, I think that we can be continually looking at how we structure effective communication and collaboration in our classrooms and always seek to do a little bit better. How do we do a little bit more? How do we get them a little bit more outside of themselves as they're learning our content? So that we're no longer solving for X, but we're solving for X in order to understand the cultural shift that has happened in order to produce that. And we might solve a problem that's way bigger than we ever thought in our own little classroom. What a beautiful thing. So my friend Genevieve knows Arabic, but learning Arabic is not adequate to sit down with a village elder and discuss building schools for girls in Pakistan. Knowing Arabic had to be layered with clothing, with how to listen and pause and not talk to the elder, of where to look, and of how to have tea. And I think, wouldn't that have been great if we had learned not just about the wars and the bulleted list of actions that had happened in our history, but if we learned about how to have tea? What a beautiful extension and what a layer of humanity. And finally, let's make our language learning, whether it's in English or in a second language, let's make it real. Real world context, real world problems, and breaking down the chunks of communication that we can recombine into personal meaning. That's the goal of our language classrooms today. Making that personal meaning and making connections. So I think back to Mrs. Schubach, and that she really was a good teacher. She was a good teacher for her time, and I respect what she did. She brought beautiful ideas to me. But we are not isolated, we are not alone, and we can't avoid this connection. We have things that we can do to structure strong, strong leaders in our schools. Our kids can come out not just knowing the best math, the best science, the best reading, the best languages. We can have them ready to make a difference. And we can layer in with our education that element of true humanity. Thank you.